Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Victor and you're watching a Dark Souls 3 review by the Medieval Gameplays channel, so let's get into it. I would like to start this off with a little talk about previous games that made Dark Souls 3 possible. And no, I'm not talking about Demon Souls, however, I will mention it in this review as well. So now, when I got you intrigued, let's reveal the mystery. King's Field. The series that kicked off Demon Souls and Dark Souls later on, which originated from another game, but I don't want to go too deep into it, otherwise this video will end up as a violent clusterfuck of titles that have almost nothing to do with the star of this review. So what is King's Field? Well, it's kind of a mix of medieval fantasy, early Doom and Souls series. So you ask me, why the fuck are you talking about this game from the Stone Ages? But what really fascinates me is how From Software went from this to this, and then eventually to this. And it's really important to understand this because there is a huge difference, I mean, if you didn't notice. So finally, Dark Souls 3. Dark Souls 3 is everything you wanted from the Dark Souls, and it leaves out what made you dislike Dark Souls 2. While I will continue playing this game even after I complete it, I wanted to give you guys a proper review. So let's first talk about the pros. It's got a fantastic soundtrack, and it's actually the best one in my opinion from the series. Very fluid combat, with a much faster pace to it, something which I enjoy a lot more to the slower, albeit more methodical combat of past titles, which could be a con for some people, but it's my review, so I get to say whatever I want. New combat mechanics and moves such as charged strong attacks add a lot more depth to encounters. More so in PvP than PvE, because if you don't have good sense of timing, then you will simply get hit first or even miss. Bosses and mobs alike have advanced movesets. Bosses also have varied and unique visual designs, which is evident everywhere you go exploring. Interesting characters and very emotionally engaging story arcs. Not gonna go too deep into this in case of spoilers. Better new player experience in regards to how the plot is delivered. It also introduces some very interesting new lore. Has a much more grim and darker atmosphere and feel as opposed to previous titles, possibly due to the fact that darker themes are introduced and major themes are expressed in more detail through various story arcs. Level design is, for the most part, pretty good. Very good placing in regards to character progression. Upgrade materials are limited early on and become abundant later. PvP when 1 versus 1 is very enjoyable and has high skill ceiling. That's it for pros, now let's get to the cons. Casual invasions when the host has phantoms are a mess 90% of the time and become a war of attrition rather than skill, circumvented somewhat by being in the Mound Maker's Covenant. Most of the armors and weapons, although that is excusable, are ripped off from Dark Souls 1 and more so from Dark Souls 2. It would be kind of cool to see more new content in that regard. The Firekeeper is a painfully generic NPC. She only has like one line of dialogue for 80% of the game, and more importantly lacks any agency in regards to a key moment in the story. Bosses, while enjoyable owing to their advanced movesets, fantastic score and great visual design, are a little too easy aside a few in particular. The levels themselves are much harder than the bosses most of the time. Art direction, while good, is a little too much Bloodborne-ish, becomes painfully evident towards the end of the game. And from what I can tell, animation cancelling from Dark Souls 2 is gone. A shame, as that mechanic added so much depth to the PvP. After having tried different builds and characters and playthroughs, the best way to describe Dark Souls 3 is to consider it like the perfect baby between all the souls. It has the awesome feel of Demon Souls and its hub, the lore and the parry system of Dark Souls, some of the improvements and the length of Dark Souls 2, and finally more characterized weapons and a slightly more fast-paced combat system from Bloodborne. And I guess I would say the same on the level design, with a central hub and many huge areas connected between them. Slightly more linear than Dark Souls, but larger than Bloodborne and way more complex than Dark Souls 2. Wherever you go, there are plenty of secrets and treasures, without considering the amount of creatures, NPCs and missable quests. It's the perfect conclusion to a great saga, and I really hope Namco won't milk it. That's it guys, thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.